Welcome back, everyone, to GGN. This is part 2 for this news report today. There'll probably be about 4 parts for today, Friday, June 14th, 2013. I'm Darko, ready to go here about Iran and the elections that are taking place. We don't give a damn about the United States, says Iran, who's voting for their new president amid criticism. So 60,000 polling stations had closed across Iran as the nation cast their ballots to choose its new president. Says the election comes as the country is torn by the severe financial crisis and pressured by international community over its nuclear program. The Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has already cast his vote, saying, "I recently heard that someone at the U.S. National Security Council said we do not accept this election in Iran." He says, "We don't give a damn what they think," he stressed. So, says at the end of May, U.S. Secretary John Kerry questioned the credibility of the Iranian presidential election, criticizing the disqualification of a few candidates and accusing Tehran of disrupting internet access. It's pretty interesting. The United States actually, I mentioned this before, one of the few things they lifted from the sanctions was very timely, coincidentally, was little gadgets and technology gadgets for social networking so they could try to foment unrest like they're doing in Turkey, I believe. I mean, legitimate concerns, yeah, but they use that. They know how to use masses of people to create instability. It says large voter turnout boosts Iran's international power. The quality of elections in the Islamic Republic is different from other countries in that elections in our country are meant to offer support to the Islamic establishment. So. And Turkey, the Turkey unrest, tear gas is not enough. If I was in power, I would have used guns against protesters in this Taksim Square, says supporters of Erdogan. That's actually what they do in Bahrain, but you don't see much on that. Iraqi victims of this Halabja chemical attack sue French firms. So a group of Kurdish victims of the 88 chemical attack against the Iraqi city are filing a lawsuit against 2 French companies for supplying chemical weapons to Iraq's former dictator Saddam Hussein. It says nearly 5,000 people, mostly women and children, immediately died a horrific death in the biggest poison gas attack in history. They say the French companies were definitely aware of how Saddam was using their tons of chemical shipments. And you hear stories like this every now and then about Libya. South Africa to hand back Col Gaddafi's money. They've announced its intention to hand back money stashed in the country by Gaddafi, the late Libyan leader, after reaching an agreement with the new powers in Tripoli, which are complete sellouts. But it's interesting, stash money. Well, let's see here. The big picture, war on Libya is war on entire Africa. In 2010, Gaddafi offered to invest $97 billion in Africa to free it from Western influence on condition that African states rid themselves of corruption and, corruption. Gaddafi always dreamed of a developed, united Africa and was about to make that dream come true, and nothing is more terrifying to the West than a developed, united Africa with their own, of course, diner currency. So, he was, says here, Libya is one of the biggest contributors to the budget of the African Union. So it says here in Mali, for several years Mali's been confronted with the activities of radical Islamist Al-Qaeda. Gaddafi's money and diplomacy have helped to resolve conflicts in northern Mali between rebels and the government. So it goes on here, it says that nowadays Gaddafi has many supporters in Mali who regularly march to protest against Western-led military intervention in Libya. In the Congo, Libya has put $65 billion into sovereign wealth funds, including one specifically designed to make investments in Africa. Also, let's see, in 2010, they planned to fund the building of a highway north of Congo's capital, where a mosque was planned in Liberia that provided millions of investment projects, helping to strengthen the role of the president. It says here, Gaddafi's help includes funding of rubber processing factory plant, a technical and vocational school for the handicapped, as well as Libyan assistance in helping Liberia tackle food crisis and renovation. In Niger, they helped to prop up the government, and authorities would become more fragile without his financial help. It says here they announced in 2010 the creation of a $100 million investment fund as part of strengthening bilateral ties. It would include 100 million euros for the construction of the Trans-Sahara Highway for the north of Niger. And it goes on and on. Chad, Central African Republic, Mauritania, Sudan, just millions of dollars. So, and it'd be one thing if they weren't taking care of their own people and then they were sending that money out, like the United States, but they took care of their own people and they helped their fellow countries, their fellow Africans. Obama family trip to Africa to cost $60 to $100 million in security. So they're going to Africa later this month, him and his family, but he said it won't be cheap. It's expected to cost the American taxpayer $60 to $100 million. Has to do with hundreds of U.S. Secret Service agents dispatched, Navy aircraft carriers, amphibious ships, full medical trauma centers. It says military cargo planes with 56 support vehicles, 14 limousines, 3 trucks with sheets of bulletproof glass. Fighter jets will fly in shifts, giving 24-hour coverage over the president's airspace. So he could just take $100 million and give it to put it into some kind of project or something like that, something like this, and actually help somebody. But no, he's just going to go over there and talk the talk, right? Ethiopia approves new deal on Nile River dam project, sure to piss off the Egyptians. Ethiopia's parliament has approved a measure to push ahead with this Nile River dam project while changing a colonial-era deal that gave Egypt and Sudan majority stake in the Great River. So the Prime Minister of Ethiopia has vowed that no one will stop the building of the multi-billion-dollar energy project on the Nile River. They're trying to build a hydroelectric dam. The United Nations prepares to go to war for the first time with a 3,000-strong task force sent to fight the rebels in the Congo. 3,000 UN troops are being deployed to the Central African nation. It's the first time that the UN will be in direct control of a fighting force. Oil-rich Congo has been racked by years of civil war, probably on purpose. Divide and conquer, get the resources. Even normally reluctant, Russia and China voted in favor of the action. They both have invested interest in those resources. Then we have UN concerned over recruitment of child soldiers by Congolese rebels. So grave concern recruitment of child soldiers in the Congo. Let's see here. Obama waives Bush law banning child soldiers. I go through this article every now and then. February 5th, 2013. So headline, you'll be guaranteed you will simply not find in the mainstream media. So 2008, Bush signed a law that made it a federal crime to recruit or use child soldiers under the age of 15. So, but it goes on here, and it basically says that that law was repealed. So, why Tunisia could host the U.S. military's African headquarters, talking about AFRICOM. The post-revolutionary Tunisian government may soon find itself inclined to host a major piece of the U.S. international military architecture. So, it says here that it started in 2006 when the U.S. declared its intentions to create the command. It says also, at the time, the discussion mainly centered on the possible consequences such a decision could have on Tunisian internal affairs. Tunisia reportedly rejected the U.S. request to host AFRICOM for several reasons, including they feared that fundamentalists would take such an agreement to be a declaration of war by the Tunisian government. So it says here, but now a dramatic change brought on by the revolution may alter the fate of AFRICOM in Tunisia. So every see that word revolution, just uprisings, you have to be very, very wary of where is that coming from, why, and what the reason for it is, the timeliness of it. Like I said, in Turkey, it creates instability around Syria as they're actually trying to create. They've been bringing back stabilization. There's actually refugees from Iraq going back to Syria, so they have to create more instability. Terrorists have already breached Tunisian national security, and they have breached it as well. So now they're worrying about these Tunisian jihadists returning home from Syria. So UN envoy, resentment in southern Yemen over unmet grievances is reaching a tipping point. The UN envoy to Yemen warned Tuesday that the streets are heating up in the country's restive south, and pent-up resentment over more than 2 decades of unaddressed grievances is reaching a tipping point. Calls for an autonomous state in the south in Yemen, which was once a separate country, have compounded Yemen's many problems as the impoverished nation struggles with a resurgence of al-Qaeda and a deep political crisis. Southerners have grown weary of promises unmet. Organized acts of civil disobedience have been observed weekly, sometimes resulting in injuries and deaths. And they just started drone bombing them, as well as Pakistan, the CIA that is. Kazakhstan's launch Silk Road China-Europe rail route. So Kazakhstan has launched a new transit railway linking China to Europe, aiming to beat rival routes for journey time and competition to handle a growing flow of goods along the ancient Silk Road trade route. It's a virtual bridge linking the east and the west. Then you have Russia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan form a new geopolitical triangle. The new It says negotiations during this talks will be centered on cooperation and interaction between Uzbekistan and Russia, particularly in the light of the ISAF withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2014. It says here, and the perspectives of situation development in the region. UK government signs agreement to enhance security in Tajikistan. So they're going to enhance security along the border shared by Tajikistan and Afghanistan, the British Embassy said. UK troops trained for Balkans role. Soldiers of the Irish Guards have taken part in a multinational peacekeeping exercise in Bosnia. So it says here that they traveled to the country to rehearse a potential call-up as one of the intermediate reserve units for the European Union force. Restructured in 2012 as a result of improving security in the region, EUFOR primary role is to build capacity of the Bosnian armed forces. It's a 600-strong contingent. Chinese plan for inter-oceanic canal across Nicaragua echoes British disaster of long ago. The plan to build this canal across Nicaragua is not the first time that the nation has been at the center of international efforts to open a new route between the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. In the 1800s, there were several attempts to establish a transit route or build a canal. It says that led to meddling by Americans, among others. These included notorious filibusterer William Walker, who seized power in Nicaragua for a while in the 1850s but ended up facing a firing squad. All the while, Americans heading up to California for the gold rush were sailing to Nicaragua, crossing overland and picking up another ship to San Francisco. Back in 1780, the British were trying to do the same thing. They had a grand strategic vision to burst open the door to China and seize control of the valuable China trade from the King of Spain. It says this was in the middle of the American Revolution. Spain was an ally of France, and France had come to the aid of the American rebels after Saratoga. The U.S. gives $1 billion in ammunition to Afghan army. So the U.S. government has given the Afghan army more than $1 billion worth of ammunition, according to a special inspector general for Afghanistan, in addition to the $288 million that has been spent on ammunition. So they said here they spent more than $54 billion in total to arm, train, and sustain Afghanistan security forces. It says here they continue to underperform and suffer low enlistment rates. And last story I have for you for this video is many young Afghans suffer mental illnesses with non-stop war. Afghan soldiers have shot and killed at least 135 of the American servicemen who were training them over the past 5 years. It says here the United States Agency for International Development, I guess that's, USAID, interviewed large numbers of Afghan young people last year and found them generally to be disenfranchised, unskilled, uneducated, and neglected. These people, it adds, are most susceptible to joining the insurgency. It says, by some measures, Afghans may be the most traumatized people in the world, a development that is thoroughly undercutting the strategies that the U.S. and its allies are using in Afghanistan, even as Western forces are leaving. But to this day, the American military and policy-making community does not seem even to be aware of the problem, and so they're doing little, if anything, to compensate for it. So, if the troops are getting the post-traumatic stress disorder and the people are getting post-traumatic stress disorder, then something's really messed up there. Like this, a former drone operator says he's haunted by his part in more than 1,600 deaths. Former Air Force drone operator who says he participated in missions that killed more than 1,600 people remembers watching one of the first victims bleed to death. So he was sitting in a chair in a Nevada Air Force base operating the camera when his team fired 2 missiles from the drone at 3 men walking down the road halfway around the world in Afghanistan. The missiles hit all 3 targets. He says he could see the aftermath on his computer screen, including thermal images of a growing puddle of hot blood. The guy was running forward. He was missing his right leg, he recalled, and I watched this guy bleed out, and I mean, the blood is hot. As the man died, his body grew cold, and his thermal image changed until it became the same color as the ground. He says, I can see every little pixel. He says he's been diagnosed with PTSD if I just close my eyes. He says here that he was troubled by the physical disconnect between his daily routine and the violence and power of the faraway drones, saying that you don't feel the aircraft turn, feel the hum of the engines. He says it's not the same thing. At the same time, the images coming back from the drones were very real and very graphic. He said people say that drone strikes are like mortar attacks. Well, artillery don't see this. Artillery don't see the results of the reactions. It's really more intimate for us because we see everything. He said, like, this isn't a video game. This is some sort of fantasy. This is war and people die. This is GGN. Thank you.